If the people want a government of their own, they must do the work of making it their own. Robert M. La Follette. The work of making our government our own is made easier by the initiative process, a powerful form of direct democracy that was established during the progressive movement of the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
24 states give citizens the right to propose and pass laws and amendments to state constitutions through the initiative process, without the involvement or approval of a state's legislature or governor. I'm Winston Apple, the founder of Government by the People, a political action committee focused on using the initiative process to reform our government and address critical problems. Government by the People is designed to serve as an organizing hub to coordinate the efforts of both organized groups and concerned citizens to enact meaningful reforms. We believe that if government of the people is to be government for the people, we must have government by the people. The exact lineup of initiative proposals we promote will vary from state to state. Our initial efforts have been concentrated in Missouri, where we have a list of 7 proposals. 4 that change the way we conduct our elections to level the playing field and make it easier for grassroots candidates to run viable campaigns and to win elections. 2 that address critical problems that have gone unaddressed for too long due to our dysfunctional government. And 1 that protects statutes passed through the initiative process from being repealed or amended by the state legislature without voter approval. We call the full complement of 7 proposals the Magnificent Seven. Taken as a whole and passed into law, they would provide a magnificent change from politics as usual. In this video, we will give you a more detailed description of each of these 7 proposals.
We have 4 proposals to reform our election process.
Our election process is deeply flawed. The governments we elect through our present methods do not accurately reflect the will of the people and are not doing a good job of fulfilling their constitutional duty to promote the general welfare. But the changes that need to be made to our election process are not likely to come from the people who are in office. They are winning within the present system and have little interest in changing the rules of the game. The key to overcoming the resistance of the politicians who are in power, the Achilles heel of the existing system, is the initiative process. So we begin with 4 proposals that change the way we conduct elections. The Fab Four: proportional representation in state legislatures and for seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, a public financing option for candidates, and ranked choice voting in elections for statewide offices.
We have 2 proposals for proportional representation.
Proportional representation is based on the principle that political parties or other groups of like-minded voters should be represented in a legislature based on the percentage of the total vote received by each party. If a party gets 50% of the votes cast in an election, that party should get 50% of the seats in a legislative body. If a party gets 10% of the votes cast, that party should get 10% of the seats. This approach is based on the belief that all voters deserve representation and that all political groups in society deserve to be represented in our legislatures in proportion to their strength in the electorate. Like-minded voters should be able to elect representatives in proportion to their numbers. Proportional representation is not a new or untested system. It is, in fact, the norm among democratic governments around the world. 94 countries have some form of proportional representation. An ordered party list system is the most common form, in place in 85 of these countries. In a party list system of proportional representation, each party has a primary election as they do now, but with larger districts and multiple winners in each district, voters would have a much longer list of candidates to choose from. The primary results determine which candidates are included on each party's ordered list and the order in which they are listed. The candidate for each party with the most votes is listed first. The candidate with the second most votes is listed second. There are as many candidates included on the list as there are positions to be elected. In the general election, voters vote for a party and its ordered list of candidates, or for an independent candidate. Parties are awarded seats in a legislature based on the percentage of votes cast for its list of candidates, and the top candidates from each party's list are elected. If there are 10 seats in a legislative body to be filled, and a party gets 50% of the vote, the top 5 candidates on that party's list would be elected. If there are 10 seats to be filled and a party gets 10% of the vote, only the top candidate on that party's list would be elected. An independent candidate getting 10% or more of the vote in that election would also be elected. Political scientists agree that proportional representation is a more genuinely democratic means of electing legislators and results in legislatures where majorities rule, but all points of view and values are represented, and the legislature is an accurate reflection of the entire electorate.
Proportional representation offers many advantages compared to our present system.
There are numerous problems with the way we conduct our elections. The root cause of these problems is the fact that we elect members of Congress and state legislatures using a winner-take-all system combined with single-member districts. With a single candidate elected to represent each district, only the voters who voted for that candidate are truly represented. In leaving all voters who are in the minority unrepresented, this system violates the first principle of democracy, representation in proportion to numbers. The solution is proportional representation. In winner-take-all single-member systems, 2 parties dominate. With proportional representation, there are always more than 2 parties. Natural patterns of voter distribution contribute to the problems of a winner-take-all system. Democrats tend to cluster in urban areas, while Republican voters outnumber Democrats in most suburban and rural areas. These natural variations in patterns of voter distribution often lead to distortions in representation with winner-take-all systems. Proportional representation eliminates these distortions. Gerrymandering, the practice of drawing political boundaries to give one party an advantage over the other, adds to these distortions in representation that are inherent in a single winner system. Proportional representation puts an end to gerrymandering. With 5 or more winners in a larger district, the effects of gerrymandering are neutralized. With statewide elections, there are no district lines to be drawn. Third-party and independent candidates rarely have a realistic chance of winning in a winner-take-all contest from a single winner district. They often act as spoiler candidates who indirectly hurt the major party candidate whom they and their supporters would clearly favor over the other major party candidate. With proportional representation, third-party and independent candidates win seats in legislatures and work in harmony with the dominant parties on an issue-by-issue basis. Voter participation in primary elections is very low in a winner-take-all system because there is rarely a meaningful choice to be made. Contested primaries are rare, especially those with the choice of more than 2 candidates. With the party list system of proportional representation, primary elections are extremely important, with voters determining the order in which candidates will appear on their party's ordered list, and therefore which candidates are most likely to win election from each party in the general election. With more candidates and more parties to choose from, voter participation is much greater in countries with proportional representation. Our elections have devolved into endless fundraising campaigns, punctuated by advertising campaigns as each election approaches. Candidates raise vast sums of money and spend much of it on television advertising attacking their opponents. This aspect of our elections has contributed significantly to the perception of most voters that politics is a dirty business and that most politicians are corrupt. Money does not play nearly as dominant a role in countries with proportional representation. With multiple winners from each district and many more candidates as a result, attack ads are pointless, and the focus shifts to party platforms and the issues addressed within them. It is more difficult for media to limit their coverage of elections to reporting on which candidates have raised the most money and who is ahead in the polls. Elections should be focused on issues instead of personalities. This brings us back to the biggest flaw in a winner-take-all system with single-member districts. It can leave a sizable minority of voters unrepresented. We often speak of red states and blue states, and in a winner-take-all system, that is accurate. Republican voters in a state controlled by the Democratic Party are unrepresented. Democratic voters in a Republican state are unrepresented. With proportional representation, all voters are represented. Instead of red states and blue states, we get a more accurate image of the United States, 50 shades of purple. Moving away from our current winner-take-all system to a system of proportional representation will do more to improve the quality of our elections and our government than any other change we could make. If we want genuine democracy, we must adopt proportional representation.
A public financing option for candidates.
There is no shortage of proposals for how to limit the influence of money in our elections, and government by the people strongly supports those efforts. But money in politics was a problem before Citizens United and will still be a problem once we amend the Constitution to make it clear that corporations are not people and should not be allowed to contribute to political campaigns. Our proposal would provide a public financing option for candidates who voluntarily agree to certain restrictions on raising money to fund their campaigns. Candidates would voluntarily agree not to accept contributions from corporations or from political action committees that accept corporate contributions, not to accept contributions greater than $1,000 per election from any source other than their political party, and to raise at least 50% of their total funding from contributions totaling no more than $100 per donor per election. The money for the matching funds would come from a checkoff box on state income tax returns. Checking the box would not increase your tax liability or decrease your refund. The size of the match would depend upon how many taxpayers checked the box to make a contribution and how many candidates agree to the restrictions and qualify for matching funds. If a lot of taxpayers check the box and very few candidates take advantage of the matching funds, the match could be very high. If very few taxpayers check the box and a lot of candidates elect to receive the matching funds, the match would be much lower. This proposal for a public financing option comes at the problem of money in our elections by strengthening the grassroots, making it easier for voters with limited means to contribute to political candidates and for political candidates to raise enough money to run a viable campaign without accepting large contributions that frequently come with strings attached. By changing the rules, we can level the playing field and give candidates with grassroots support a better chance of winning elections.
Rank choice voting.
Ranked choice voting allows voters to vote for more than one candidate, ranking their choices in order of preference for offices like governor or lieutenant governor, where there can only be a single winner and there are more than two candidates. Voters can vote for any and all candidates they favor without indirectly helping candidates they do not support. Here's an example of how ranked choice voting works. Voter number 1 votes for Jill as his first preference, Hillary as his second preference, and Gary as his third preference, and chooses not to vote for Donald or Evan. Voter number 2 votes for Gary as her first choice, Donald as her second choice, and Evan as her third choice, and chooses not to vote for Jill or Hillary. Votes are counted in rounds. Ballots are initially counted for each voter's first choice. If a candidate gets a majority of the first choice votes, that candidate is elected. If no candidate has more than half the first choice votes, the last place candidate is eliminated. In this case, Evan would be eliminated. The voters who selected the defeated candidate as a first choice will then have their second choice votes distributed among the remaining candidates. In this case, let's assume the voter who voted for Evan listed Donald as her second choice. If that distribution results in a candidate having more than half the votes, that candidate is elected. If no candidate has more than half the votes, the process is repeated until a candidate does have a majority. In this case, we will assume that both voters who voted for Jill listed Hillary as their second choice. In this example, Hillary now has 50 votes, but needs 51 to win. So we repeat the process again. And we will assume the 3 second-choice votes from voters who had Gary as their first choice are split, with Donald getting 2 and Hillary getting 1. Hillary now has a majority and is declared the winner. Ranked choice voting offers several clear advantages over a simple winner-take-all system. There are no spoiler candidates. Voters can support third-party and independent candidates without worrying about indirectly helping a major party candidate they strongly oppose. Voters can vote for all the candidates they support in order of their true preferences without having to worry about how others will vote or who is more or less likely to win. There are no wasted votes. Voters are never faced with a lesser of two evils election. By including more candidates and more political parties, ranked choice voting promotes a wider range of political viewpoints, bringing fresh ideas and making issue-oriented discussions more common. With more candidates in the race, attack ads are less effective. With ranked choice voting, candidates do best when they campaign in a positive manner to win some level of support from as many voters as possible, including those supporting one or more of their opponents. Although the winning candidate may not have been some voters' first choice, the winner will have majority support, not just a plurality. A majority of voters will have voted for the winning candidate. By giving voters more choices and more meaningful choices, ranked choice voting will dramatically increase voter participation.
The dynamic duo consists of 2 ballot initiatives that address 3 critical problems. The Renewable Energy Project.
Urgent action is needed in response to the climate crisis, and that action is not likely to come from the federal government or most state governments anytime soon. Our proposal would create an agency known as the Renewable Energy Project. Workers would be hired to plan and carry out New Deal-type job programs to improve energy efficiency, to manufacture and install wind turbines and solar panels, to construct wind farms and solar gardens, and to plant trees. Funding for these projects would come from a tax on long-term capital gains and qualified dividends. Income from these sources has been taxed at a lower rate for some time now, based on the discredited idea that the money saved by the job creators receiving these tax breaks would trickle down in the form of more jobs. Our proposal would tax income from these passive sources at the same rate as income from work and use the funds to put people to work on jobs that pay a decent wage. The New Deal jobs programs of President Franklin Roosevelt proved the effectiveness of socially useful public sector jobs in reducing unemployment during the Great Depression. This initiative proposal, if passed into law, would demonstrate the power and the benefits of this approach in addressing the threat posed by the climate crisis and yield immediate benefits by providing a powerful boost to the economies of the states enacting a Green New Deal. It's time for us to stop talking about what needs to be done in response to the climate crisis. It is time for us to act.
A public option for health insurance.
The lack of a public option for health insurance is the biggest flaw in the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. The need for a public option was dismissed at the time the legislation was passed. The point was made that if people wanted a public option, they could form health insurance cooperatives. Government by the People is supporting a ballot initiative that would do just that by forming the Missouri Health Insurance Cooperative, a truly affordable option for health insurance. The plan is self-contained and mandated to be revenue neutral. No tax dollars are involved. Both premiums and maximum out-of-pocket expenditures would be based on percentages of a member's income. Premiums would be set no higher than necessary to cover the cost of reimbursing members for expenses that exceed out-of-pocket maximums, which would also be kept as low as possible. This is a market-oriented plan. Members would be free to receive care from any healthcare provider, pay the healthcare provider directly, and be reimbursed for any expenses that exceed the out-of-pocket maximum. The health insurance cooperative would act the way insurance is supposed to act, with members sharing risk and benefits being paid only when a member has unusually high medical expenses. With paperwork minimized, the cost of treatment made transparent, and the costs of having private for-profit health insurance companies act as gatekeepers for health care eliminated, the overall cost of health care would be dramatically reduced. If the Affordable Care Act is not repealed, the addition of this public option will fix the primary flaw in that legislation. If the Affordable Care Act is repealed, the Missouri Health Insurance Cooperative may be the only truly affordable option for many Missourians.
The Protector.
We have one final proposal. Laws passed through the initiative can be substantially altered or even repealed immediately by state legislatures. This has happened in the past. We are proposing an amendment providing that any repeal or amendment of a law passed through the initiative must also be approved by the voters before taking effect. If this proposed amendment to state constitutions is approved by voters, legislators will no longer be able to blatantly disregard the will of the people.
In conclusion,
the combined effect of passing these 7 proposals into law would amount to a political revolution. But this revolution is not going to be nearly as hard as the first American Revolution. We will not have to suffer the way General George Washington's troops suffered through a long, cold winter at Valley Forge. The men who signed the Declaration of Independence were truly risking their lives. Had we lost the Revolutionary War, signing the Declaration of Independence was the same as signing their own death warrants. Had we lost, they would have been hung as traitors. Signing our petitions carries no such risk. The task before us is considerably less daunting and perilous. If you are a registered voter and would like to help us reform our government and address critical problems through the initiative process, go to governmentbythepeople.org to find additional information about our proposals, including the full text of each petition. If you want to sign one or more of our petitions, click on the Join the Campaign link and provide us with your email address. We will then keep you informed of signing opportunities in your area.
we began this video with a quote from Fighting Bob La Follette. If the people want a government of their own, they must do the work of making it their own.
We are doing that work. We invite you to join us.
Take back your